I appreciate you opening the space. I think it's a very important topic. So, and please stop me. I'll just some opening framing. So we know, for example, like when we say pluralism, there's pluralism in the sense of a government that can hold difference and people that have different views and you don't get a civil war. Then there is pluralism, say the ability for different nations to engage in free markets and to interact and to get along. And then there's pluralism in the sense of the Christian runs into the Muslim and they're able to get along, right? So there's kind of different layers of this question. Indeed, you could say a lot of the dream of the Federalist Project, and we'll just say kind of, let's just say the American project, although that's a vast generality and is not adequate, but is a notion that you could have a certain procedure and certain institutions that people will agree that if we submit ourselves to, I think Mark was correctly describing this, that the outcome that comes out will be one we can all agree with, even if it's not the outcome I like, because I trust the institutions, I trust the law, and so on and so forth. Now, Habermas talks about the legitimation crisis, and we don't believe in institutions anymore, and we think the law is corrupt, and et cetera, so forth. So people start questioning that, right? So you have the institutional way to deal with pluralism is arguably failed for many people, in the eyes of many people. And if you say it hasn't, there are people that disagree with you, and that itself is a pluralistic difference. So you have a problem, right? Yep. Now, the other idea of, say, the Fukuyama-Washington consensus is the notion that, and this goes back to Quinn, Josefina Quinn talks about the Silk Roads and Zarathustranism and all these different things. And we see in history ways that economic exchanges and trade can deal with pluralism, because people are trading spices and it could be Jew, Christian, Muslim, and they don't kill each other, right? Dietrich McCloskey talks about this, other people, but there's this idea of the Washington consensus in capitalism being that, okay, I may not understand your worldview, but if we all trade markets and what Marx may call the commodity form, it kind of functions as a universal language where we can interact even if I don't fully understand one another, because in a sense, we reduce one another to the interaction of the economics. And in this way, reductionism is not necessarily bad, because if we're vastly diverse and different, we're unintelligible to one another. But if we come together in the economic exchange and in a sense reduce our difference, we can interact and then like a zip file uncompress when we go back to our society. And so you come together and uncompress, come together and uncompress. And there's really a sense in which the way that the world has always dealt with pluralism, because of course, pluralism is a funny term, you know, Europe, Huguenots, I'm from a Huguenot, America, you know, there's always Methodist, Baptist. It always depends on the gradient of extreme you're talking about, right? And I would note that the difference we always care about in pluralism is moral difference. It always comes down to that. Things we think are moral disagreements. It's not merely the taste of food and holidays. It's when we have a disagreement on an ethical issue. And Dr. Hunter, in his book Before the Shooting Begins, was warning about this in the 90s. But anyway, so basically institutions allow you to compress, interact, decompress when you go away from the institution and your difference. Economics does the same. Oh, but what if people feel like the economic system failed or is leading to a Nickland singularity? So we don't trust the economy, right? We don't trust that interaction. Oh, and by the way, as Marx points out, as you participate in the economy, it trains your habits to be unable to interact with the world in terms beyond, say, the commodity form or pricing. Like an example I would make is if you say, I'm going to go learn guitar because I value it, and someone says, why are you going to be a musician? And you say no, they're like, that's stupid. Yeah. And actually, you're trained to believe that if you're not going to get paid to do something, it's not a good use of time. And you actually have you need kind of the philosophy and idea that it is a good use of time. Otherwise, you don't. And then you're not going to have a way to form community because you didn't learn all those skills and abilities you needed because you only did the things that made you money, right? So then the economy is training your habits in a certain way that makes it difficult. So this is the last thing I'll say before I can keep going. So now I think when we think about pluralism, basically we're kind of at the last line of defense now, because I don't know if we can jump up to those three and have them fix the issue of pluralism, because they're in legitimization crisis, and you'd probably have to reestablish multi-polar trade agreements or whatever, and there'd probably have to be a war.
Can you reiterate the three economics?
So you have we could say the economic, is a way to deal with pluralism. You have the institutional, which I think Mark was toying. And the last one here is the literal encounter. The Muslim and the Christian, us all coming together, form of pluralism, right? Yeah. And basically, I would argue that if this doesn't work, then people aren't going to see a reason to do the work to restore the other two, right? Because it's actually just kind of hiding the fact that we don't want to get along, and in that way it's repressive, and that way it's a lie. And also, I don't even benefit. A lot of people feel like they don't even benefit from modern capitalism. They don't benefit from the system. In fact, as a minority, I feel like the system is set up to keep me down, and it's to help the privilege, right, et cetera, right? So if we can't restore the face-to-face, well, then there's no evidence to think it's worth restoring the other two. Now I'd have to put meat on those bones. But the way I would start with it, because now we have issues of how do we not just fall into some very problematic perennialism where we saw all views are the same? How do we not end up saying that, well, you know, there's no such thing as judgment? Because that right there is a moral difference, and people feel like they're lying if they don't bring up their Christianity to people because I'm sending you to hell or different things. So how do we deal with the encounter? In the mental model, I always like how Ivan Illich talks about the Good Samaritan, where he says you're surprised by the man on the side of the road. Like you're surprised by the person you encounter. So if we can't deal with pluralism, so you could theoretically, I would argue the dream of the Enlightenment is a way to deal with differences, make everyone to get everyone on the same autonomous rationality, the same internally consistent system. Please note, internally consistent is not the same as generally consistent. But if we can all actually kind of follow the same view, then logic and rationality will bind us. And we should always know the Enlightenment is not crazy to try to seek this dream, because the religious wars, look at, have we really, we may be critiquing the Enlightenment a lot today, but do we really have a better alternative if all we're doing is killing one another and isolating and herkimerity?
It happened for a reason.
Yeah, man, because autonomous rationality means we have a way to bring ourselves together. Now it reduces our personhood and reduces our qualities and diversity and humanity. But if all we're going to do is use our humanity to kill one another, is it really that bad?
It was the same. It was one of those collapsing structures that allowed us to do something, but it's not objective. It's not
absolutely. And basically, I would say the dream continues in the Nicholandian AI, which is basically just the spread of the fungibility logic. I would say to start, the question of pluralism should be focused on not getting everyone to have the same views, but the encounter itself, encounterology, the surprise of, say, the Christian and the atheist, the running into one another. And when I talk about the girdle point is not a point above the encounter. Is what you're doing is you're coming into the encounter to meet the other in a way. It's not that you stop believing in your ideas, but you have to make a live judgment and discernment with the other person. Because I would argue most people, when they encounter other people, their ideas are talking through them more than they're talking their ideas. Actually, and one of the weird things is you got to do philosophy precisely to escape ideas. Like there's this whole problem, like ideas, like there's this idea that ideas are a problem. Yeah, but the problem is you already have ideas. And if you don't think about them, they like possess you and they run your life for you, actually. And so there's this weird thing where you have to think about ideas, what makes it look like all you care about is ideas, precisely so you don't care about ideas and you do learn to play guitar without getting paid for it, and you're able to have community, because if you didn't think about stuff is worth doing, even if you don't get paid about it, you wouldn't do it, and now you don't have a community.
Right.
So
clip the last minute for my wife.
Yes, sir. And so we have to think through ideas precisely so we can meet the other person in a way where our ideas are not getting in the way of the other person. And I would argue you can do that without giving up your beliefs or falling into some sort of lame perennialism. And then in that place of live personal encounter, if you truly believe Jesus is Lord and Savior, and you're like, well, I should shine with that beauty to convince them, then shine with the person of Christ and have that convince them versus a proposition. Right? Yes. Because it's not a choice between giving up your beliefs to stand for the other, or like being kind of top-down tyrannical. Shine. You know, for me, the correct evangelism in this sense is shining, because shining attracts. You attract people into something if you shine with a certain quality of life. So as you develop that shine, I would hope, if the Muslim truly believes in their beliefs, I would hope that they would try to convince me to be a Muslim. If the Hindu truly believes, you would kind of hope it, right? It'd be kind of weird if they didn't, right? Well, then let everyone come together in that place of the live discernment and shine with what they believe. And that's a way where you can have, quote unquote, difference and even competition, convincing, but it's not in the form of violence. It's in the form of embodied truth. And if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, then if you come into that space, then you'll sign with that beauty and attract people. All of that has to be expanded on. But I believe in that space, there are possibilities that can help us begin addressing these things.